Hi, Polly. How are you? Where? So we
Our
need an
week is
update. Like, how are you doing? Where are you? What's going on?
I'm going crazy in my house. I'm making my husband run up the hill with me. I'm drinking champagne at night. I'm gaining weight probably because I'm cooking like mad. And I'm actually trying to practice a little bit. To
Uh,
regain, I only have a viola though, Brett, so watch out.
oh my gosh, there goes my job. I would happily lose my job to you.
Oh my gosh,
so,
I'm enjoying watching you. You're amazing.
oh, thank you. But that sounds phenomenal. Like, that sounds incredible.
Yeah, well,
But
you
you
know I
just,
ride horses too, so that's the other thing I
I
do.
didn't know that. So I want to hear about all of this. So, okay, well, with that situation, I guess you can social distance and be on a horse, right?
Yes, we are not, we're on the excluded group, so we're not forbidden to do our sport.
Oh, fantastic. So back up. I want to hear your whole like story with music.
Well, I grew up in Rochester, New York,
Okay.
and at the time I was there, I was a kid going to the Eastman School, the preparatory part,
Hmm.
and Eric Leinsdorf was the conductor of the orchestra. I mean, can you believe that? And this
No.
kid, David Leinsdorf, was at school with me. Yeah, we went to a little private school where I had 16 people in my class, and Leinsdorf kid was younger than me. But anyway, I knew who he was, and my aunt, my godmother actually, lived across the street from them in Pittsford, which is one of the little outlying communities of Rochester. Anyway, so then I graduate with honors from the preparatory department of the Eastman School as a kid and went to Oberlin because my dad would not let me go to a conservatory because he wanted me to get a bigger education than just music school.
Hmm.
So Oberlin it was, and will you believe Paul Schur was the teacher there when I first got there?
Paul,
And
sure.
then,
Okay.
and he left at Christmas time and never came back. We never knew what happened. And he was not married to Bonnie at the time. So, I mean, I never heard that whole story. Paul was always,
Like,
always wouldn't talk to me about it. But anyway, he was replaced by Stuart Kanan, who was phenomenal. I loved him.
wow.
And I was concert master there for my junior and senior year. And I remember this conductor coming in, and his name was Franz Bibo. And he was a wonderful guy. He had been in Germany, and I did not realize he had been in an internment camp until he
Wow.
raised his arms one time, and I could see the tattoo on his wrist. I'll tell
Wow.
you, I grew up with World War II because my dad was in the army and my uncles were in the army, so it was my world as a kid, and
Hmm.
it was, I mean, riveting is the only word to describe it. It was really something.
So,
So,
so this must
after,
be nothing for you. What we're doing now.
oh no, my lord! Well, I think about the polio. I had an uncle who had polio in the 50s, and he lived in my house for a couple of weeks before they realized, and he was hauled off in an ambulance in an iron lung. And
Yeah, in Ireland.
I had never gotten a shot for polio. They didn't have one then.
Oh
So,
my
boy,
God.
was I lucky, huh?
Yeah,
Anyway,
absolutely. Okay. So you're at
so
Oberlin.
so Oberlin we finished, and Stuart sent me to Galamian in his graduate school in New York.
Hmm.
And of course, Itzhak Perlman and Pinky Zukerman and all the big talents were there. And I didn't know who they were. They weren't famous yet,
Mm.
but they were fun. And boy, they knew how to do pranks. Oh my Lord, they knew how to do pranks. And it was just a great time. And those were the days when Julliard was still uptown. It was not, there was no Lincoln Center yet.
Mm.
And so we were at 122nd Street. And as a young, unmarried girl, wandering around up there off the subway or the bus or whatever was maybe not the safest thing to do. But I was carrying with me I had a Grancino violin in those days,
Oh
which is
wow.
still pretty nice
Yeah.
fiddle. And so my biggest moment then, after all the pranks we did at school, which Ryan has forbid me to tell the story,
You can
he
tell
get me
one.
a few glasses of champagne and I will
Okay.
maybe
I'll call back around 9 o'clock.
I do remember the time that Horowitz came back from his retirement, And we waited for 2 days. We stood in line around Carnegie Hall to get tickets to that concert.
Wow.
And it was an amazing experience. Anyway, but I wanted to play in the American Symphony, which was conducted by Stokowski, who, of course, was a great, famous name. I think he was in his 90s then. So I made the date to audition for him, and I was given this address, and it was on Fifth Avenue. I mean, what did I knew nothing. I was from upstate New York, and then Oberlin, which is in the middle of nowhere, a little town, and then Fifth Avenue. Did I have a clue about Fifth Avenue and the famous people there? Well, he lived above Jackie Kennedy.
Oh my gosh.
And this was in 1964, so that was only a couple of years after Jack had been assassinated. And so there was Secret Service all over the place. And, you know, you had to have a name to get into the building, and riding up the elevator was this fancy elevator. I didn't know elevators were fancy.
And here you come with your violin.
Here I come with my violin. I mean, I was already nervous playing for him, but this environment just made it 50 times worse. So I get up to his floor, and the elevator doors open, and I think, oh, there's no hallway. It opened up into this grand living room with antiques and oriental rugs. And I mean, it was just incredible. And he saunters out of this room and greets me, and I get escorted into the sunroom where this big vista of window and glass overlooks Central Park. You didn't even know you were in a big city because all you saw were trees and and the Central Park pond and beautiful green grass. You thought, am I in New York? Anyway, I was shaking by this time, and how do you audition for somebody else? So it's like Midsummer Night's Dream. You know,
What did you prepare?
I mean, I had concerto, the Mendelssohn concerto, the Brahms concerto, the Chausson poem, and Midsummer Night, you know, stuff. And he just wanted to hear a little bit of beautiful music. He didn't care about all this. He knew I could play technically, and so he just let me loose on the Mendelssohn Midsummer Night's Dream, and once he realized I could play that last movement, and a little bit of the Chausson poem, which was really, it has a beautiful opening, maybe you know, just a few minutes, and he just was the nicest guy in the world. And I ended up playing for him the whole time I was in New York. I played in that orchestra.
Wow.
And it was filled with famous people. It was just an experience. I mean, Stokowski, for heaven's sakes, he belongs in the history books.
Yeah, I mean, this is like the golden age of music.
I remember one incident, and we were rehearsing a Brahms symphony, and the horn players were playing a joke on him, and they were, horn players are all alike, aren't they? And he kept telling them to play it softer and softer. It was this beautiful moment in a Brahms symphony, and finally they just put their lips up to the horn and didn't play at all. And, you know, the whole orchestra knew it, but he was going deaf at this time. I mean, what was he, 94 or something? And it was a very kind of mean trick to play on this famous guy, you know, but he was amazing, you know, and just the expressiveness of his arms and his face and his body movements for these grand old pieces. I mean, you just lived another life when you played with him. It was fun.
He embodied music.
Yeah. And then I came out here.
Oh, right after that, I was going to say, so after New York.
After marrying the husband that got the job out here. He was from out here, actually. And so he got the job at the LA Times, or Times Mirror Company that Chandler's ran. Oh, that's a great story. So I came out here, and I was talked into joining the Heifetz class by my friends who were in the class. And then I went through that viola experience. Oh, Lord. So Mrs. Chandler, who built the music center, as you know, was my husband's boss, kind of.
Oh,
her
wow.
whole family, Otis and Mrs. Chandler. So she says one day at lunch, because they had this fancy executive dining room, "What does your wife do?" He says, "Oh, I don't know. She takes violin lessons from Yasha somebody." So the next thing I knew, we had front row seats at the Hollywood Bowl.
That's amazing. Wow.
So anyway, that was really fun. So that class was an experience. I have to say, I enjoyed watching him and listening to him and being close to him. I played chamber music with Cy Ramo, who was a famous engineer who started that company, Ramo Wooldridge. It's one of the early space companies that invented all kinds of stuff that went into rockets. So I was hired as the second violinist to either Cy or Yasha. And I do think maybe it was Nick Rosen playing the cello, or anyway, they had a big cellist. So I'm sitting there listening to the two of them. Cy would play; he played terribly. Of course, Dick was questionable. And then Heifetz would come, and I'd play second violin to Heifetz, and he and Cy Ramo would have these fights about what to do, and it was. I mean, Cy Ramo was a famous engineer scientist, and fighting with who Heifetz respected, but it was quite an exchange to have lived through that. I lasted almost a year. I didn't stay much more than a year because I started having a musical life, with joining the Pasadena Symphony and the chamber orchestra, playing a bit in the studios and playing a lot of chamber music, string quartets. I'd had the experience, and I had already been through graduate school with Galamian, who was a real teacher. And so, getting close up to Heifetz was an experience.
So
anyway.
Tell me how the music scene has changed since back, after all these years. It's a totally different beast.
Well, I played in the studios with all the Sid Sharps and the Jimmy Getzoffs and the Jerry Vinci's. I remember some of the solos were amazing. They'd come out of nowhere. Just these guys could play anything.
But also, this is a little triggering what I'm about to say, but also the music was incredible. We played commercial music.
It was a lot harder, and I think, and we were expected to perform more. It wasn't just whole notes. It kind of evolved later.
The whole note.
I retired. I had to play hard. I remember playing my first movie my first recording job was with Streisand in a movie called On a Clear Day. And Marvin Hamlish, who was one of our summer conductors, before he died out. That was really a tragic moment.
He was my favorite.
Oh, I loved him. And to see him, what did we have to see him 2 weeks before he died? Mm-hmm. That was so, so tragic.
And the best energy. That's rare, to have someone with such great energy and musicality. Yeah.
But
okay.
But it was a tough score. And I never sat down and been throwing music at me. And all these violinists in the orchestra had been Toscanini players and, players from famous orchestras. So it was really fun to be immersed in that world for a while.
I'm going to go back
and there weren't very many women either. I was very early with the women.
Right.
And there was Dorothy Wade, and Bonnie came later, and Irma Newman, and just a few. Pam Goldsmith I knew from years of playing together. We played together a lot, of course, over those early years. Anyway, it was funny to see how now there's mostly women.
Right. I know. Sometimes it's just only
turned
women.
Upside down.
This is Polly, you're incredible. You need to write a book.
No. Well, that George Mester was at Julliard when I was there.
Oh, interesting.
He was the second orchestra conductor. I was with Renee Morel, who was the conductor of the first orchestra. And I was principal second in that orchestra. And it's funny how time goes on. But Nestor was the famous conducting teacher and guru of the second orchestra, and he was very well liked there.
Huh. Interesting.
But I didn't get to know him very well there. It's just we connected later on and realized that we had been at school together. So,
now, you were the personnel manager when he was at Pasadena, right?
Yes, but that was after Nathan Kaproff retired. Nathan Kaproff, I helped him for a lot of years at the end because he was getting older. And so he finally retired and handed it over.
Oh, I see. Okay, so tell me how you transitioned from being in the orchestra to being the person.
I had to retire from playing because I had nerve damage to my arms.
Wow.
And I went through 3 surgeries from famous hand surgeons that really couldn't put Humpty Dumpty back together. And it was so frustrating. And finally I decided I don't want to half play. I don't want to pretend to play. I either play or I don't play. So that's when I retired from actually playing. And that was probably 2003, 4, somewhere in there.
Hmm.
And so Nathan knew how much I loved the music, and so he just invited me to come and join him. And I never got paid for it or anything at that point. And so he was getting older. He was getting ready to retire. So I just did that for, I think, 4 or 5 years before he finally retired.
And you took the job. Wow. So what happened to your hands? I mean, what were you feeling? Were you just
It's
in
ulnar
burn?
nerve damage, and my hand went to sleep. It's the
Oh,
funny bone
gosh.
nerve, the one that goes through the funny bone.
Huh.
And boy, you go around the world. I went to famous surgeons in Boston and New York and Texas and here and up at Stanford. Anyway, you find out what doctors can't do at some
Right.
point.
And there
And
was so no one knew no one had any way to help you.
Well, they tried to reposition that ulnar nerve and move it from the funny bone, and it is now on the inside of my arm. And well, I'm lucky to have use of it a little bit, but I get tingly feet. The little finger and the ring finger go to sleep a lot, and that means they are not triggering. They don't go as fast, so I couldn't do the scales as fast. I just couldn't play as fast. I could play slow, my whole notes. Maybe if I'd realized the business was going to be all whole notes, I would have.
Yeah. And you could stick with the viola, like viola
I
whole
was
notes.
just about to say that.
You're
That's funny.
set. It's like you've been reborn.
I do have my viola,
I think
and
you
I
should
do
get
have my
cracking.
picot bow,
Oh,
which is
wow.
a heavy bow. And,
Violin bow.
Yes, but it's in between, actually. I used
Oh.
it on my viola when I played the viola.
Hmm.
And I have a lamy bow, and I sold my
Oh.
Guadagnini. So,
Wow.
it was just too valuable. We needed the money.
Yeah, yeah. I can, yeah. If only we would have all known, we could have bought a bunch of
Yeah.
those back in the day. Oh,
But can you believe I started with Richard Laird in this orchestra I must have been 72. And it
wow.
was still a volunteer orchestra. It was half volunteer and half. Virginia Baker was concertmaster.
Now, when
She
you
was.
when you came to LA, you came first to Pasadena. Is that where you moved?
Well,
Oh.
that's because my husband's family
Right.
lived here in Pasadena.
Oh, okay.
So that's why.
Okay, so the orchestra in the 70s was originally a community orchestra.
It was kind of a volunteer community orchestra, but Richard Laird upped the game because he was so phenomenal. I mean, you could just see the history. He was about Stokowski's age, and he just reminded me, and I'd seen great conductors all my life, as I was just telling you. So it was just wonderful. But when Dan Lewis came, he changed the whole. He first of all made it all professional, and he brought in the hot shots from the studios.
Mm.
So we got great horn playing, great flute. Luis DiTullio came, Doug Davis came. I'm trying to. I don't think Myra played, but Myra Kestenbaum. But I'm trying to remember who the great violist was that came in there. Well, Janet came later,
Mm.
but anyway, was terrific.
So you've literally seen the orchestra in all of its incarnations.
Right. I didn't stay permanent. I kind of part-timed it with Dan Lewis because I was with the chamber orchestra, and I had children. I had 3 children then, so I needed to spend more time at home, and I was doing a lot more studio work at that time.
Mm.
So the time constraints were, and then when George came and I knew him, it just sort of became a priority.
That's pretty amazing. So how's your family doing? You need to give us an update on everybody. And
Well, I'm home with my husband, and I cook a lot now. I think I'm gaining weight or something. My
So-
daughter Allison can't do she's an actress, and she did the Days of Our Lives for 20 years. Can you believe that?
Oh, wow.
So she's now doing Hallmark movies, and she was on all day Saturday. Her movies were, but they film up in Canada, and they can't work now.
Right.
So they're home.
So
And my
what's going with that industry? They don't know what's going to happen, right?
Yeah, they don't know. It's like us.
Yeah, I guess we don't know either.
My son's a banker, with everybody trying to borrow money from him.
That would be a good job to have right now.
Well, it's stressful because all his friends think he owes them. And then, it's, hey, I've known you forever.
But you've been very spoiled with the people
I've met a lot of the biggies.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. It's really amazing. And a lot of that kind of caliber or rock star classical music, it's not really around anymore, I've noticed. Starting to notice that with
like the Horowitzes and the Rubinsteins and the Piatagorskys and the Roses. And
yeah.
I mean, those were great people.
Mm-hmm. It's different now. Not that it's not as good or whatever. It's just different. Something's different about it. But
I don't know why. Are there too many, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it too, this digital situation, it kind of takes some of the mystery. These people all had a mystery.
That is exactly right.
It takes away two things, actually. It takes away the mystery, and it takes away someone's uniqueness. Like all those people you're talking about, they had a unique voice. And now the digital platform will just kind of anesthetize all that, whitewash it.
That's true. You listen to a Milstein or a Menuhin or a Heifetz, they were all infinitely different, just totally opposite.
And you could tell who was playing in just a couple notes.
Yes, I met Stravinsky and played for Stravinsky.
Okay, we have to hear this story. Enough about me. Let's hear the Stravinsky story.
No. I mean, it was at Oberlin. He came for one of those composer weeks that they do once a year at Oberlin, and I was concertmaster, so I got to play this octet. It was with winds.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, he came and rehearsed with us just in this practice room, for heaven's sakes. There was Stravinsky.
God. And what was he like?
And he was an old man. I didn't realize the greatness of it at the time. I was just this stupid kid. But I have the wall. They sent me, Oberlin demolished the building, but they sent me the wall because he wrote a thank you to me on the wall of the studio.
They actually sent you the wall.
They sent me the plaster, this piece of plaster that they... Well, I mean...
I hope you have that framed somewhere.
I have it in my
That's, I mean... Okay, so that's different, too. Not only did you have experience with all these unbelievable world-class musicians, but there was a ton of new music. Like real new music.
Real new music. There was Stravinsky, there was Schoenberg, there was... I mean, I had perfect pitch, so I was always elected because I could find the notes. And... I just remember Copeland because he came to Temyankas. He was a friend of Henry's. And so we played for him and met him, and I did chamber music with him. It was quite an experience.
What else should we discuss? Do you have more stories? Should we talk about the symphony?
Well, I mean, after Dan Lewis came George, and then after George came the guest conductors, and the Rachel Warby moments. I loved it. I love Lockie. And David is
he's that's
and I think he's just going to add a whole nother dimension to us. And
he's got such a great heart and such a great musician. And
yep, I think having the concerts in a smaller hall where we have two of them, I know how taxing it is for some of the musicians, but I think it adds another dimension for the audience. They get closer and more intimate with the whole scene, with the music and with the musicians.
Having the two concerts in one day.
Yeah, well, having a concert in a smaller situation.
I see.
They're up closer.
I see.
That hall, the Pasadena Civic, was huge, and you felt very remote when you were out in the back. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, but because rock concerts certainly have.
I know, right? Oh, rock. Well, you never know. Maybe I have this intuition that maybe the audience is going to be so kind of starved for music that maybe they'll have to add another concert. I don't know.
Well, wouldn't that be nice?
That's what I'm thinking.
Anyway, I'm looking forward to next year because I think the programs sound great, and it just looks like so much fun.
I agree. Well, Polly, thank you so much.
You're welcome so much. It's one reason I love to sit in the orchestra sometimes while you guys are playing.
I know you have the best seat.
I know, I just love it.
Well, what's amazing too is that Dave's been playing for me some of the recordings from the concerts last season. The orchestra sounds incredible. Yeah, like really good. Mm-hmm. And I remember the days, I guess, with Mester when those were all broadcast on
Don't we
KUSC.
get broadcasts every once in a while?
I don't
I
know.
thought we were. I
Oh,
don't
no?
think we were,
Well.
but we should be.
Maybe I don't listen to KUSC much anymore. But yeah, I just can't believe how good it sounds. And I listen to La Mer, and it's just stunning.
Oh, we have fabulous solo winds. I mean,
Yeah.
my gosh.
Oh, the winds are great. Everything just
Oh,
sounds
dear.
phenomenal.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for the stories. We can have a part 2. Think of some more stories and we'll do part 2. Get that viola going too.
Well, I brought it with me just in case you wanted to.
Oh,
But I actually still had one.
and you know, Laura Unger plays too.
I know she does.
Yeah, and she's been practicing.
Oh, I love it. She has it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's fantastic.
This is my master plan to get everyone on the viola.
You know, it's a wonderful. I'll tell you my Walter Trampler stories too.
Oh my gosh, I want to hear about that.
No, well, not you.
Yeah, maybe I don't. All right, Polly, well, thank you so much.